Hi, welcome to the second Spline cast from Spline Doctors. My name is Andrew Gordon, and I'm going to be interviewing Academy Award-winning director Andrew Stanton. Andrew's going to talk about a lot of different things, like directing and how he goes about the process, as well as how he got into Pixar. We're going to split this interview over maybe 3 different sections, just so that we have things to post on the site. You'll have to excuse some of the audio quality just because I'm learning how to do this, and there's a lot of technical issues that I have to get through. So I hope you enjoyed the interview. It's really great and get a lot out of it. Leave comments and let us know what you think. That's really the only way we have of knowing whether you guys like this stuff or not. And hopefully we'll continue to do it with other artists. So here's Andrew Stanton. And Andrew.
You're welcome, Andrew Gordon.
I really appreciate you doing this with Spline.
Coming all the way downstairs.
Yeah, exactly.
Whew.
I guess I wanted to start off, I have a bunch of questions, but I wanted to just start off with how you got into the business. And, was there a moment that you knew you wanted to do animation?
Right.
Just quickly, how did you get into it?
Well, I think I was like a lot of people, at least I've heard this story a lot from people. I grew up on the East Coast and in the 70s into the early 80s, and so you just thought animation was something that wasn't an option. It was just something that had been done in the past and was over. Sometimes you would see like these old men out of books or something that were still alive that had something to do with Tom and Jerry or Disney or something, and it just felt to me like it was not an option. So I never even dreamed of being an animator, but I loved anything animated. I loved animation.
Awesome.
And it wasn't until I think The Illusion of Life came out when I was in my second or third year of high school. And it was like the Bible had suddenly come out, and you were just like, oh my gosh. And I just couldn't put it down. And I was always had it checked out of our high school library. Finally got my parents to buy me a copy of it. And even then it was still something that I didn't think was an art form that you could go get a job at. It was just some great craft that I admired.
And what was that age?
That would have been like 80, 81. Wow. And then I was in my guidance counselor office, and there was all these catalogs for different colleges to go to, and there was this one binder that was just hot fluorescent pink or orange, I think, and it just stuck out. And I pulled to see what it was, and it was for Cal Arts, and it was for the character animation program. It's 4 years and founded by Walt Disney, and it was like a dream. I was like, what the heck is this place? And the minute I found out that Cal Arts existed, it was like the skies opened. I was just singularly driven, totally myopic. This is what I want to do, and that's all I would do. And because I hadn't gotten serious about that all the way up until then, I decided that I really had a portfolio that was kind of crappy. Yeah, I really hadn't gotten. I was the kid in class that could draw. I had a very small school, and I was that kid. But I never took it that seriously. I was into drama. I was into music. I was making movies with my friends all the time. But I just kind of drawing was something I just didn't try too hard at because I could always do it, and there was nobody to compete with. And so once I really wanted to do it, then it was like a big slap in the face at how bad my portfolio was and how there was, at that time, CalArts was still only letting in 25 kids a year. They pretty much flat out told you if it's straight out of high school, you can't get in. And sure enough, I proved that theory. I didn't get in.
Really?
So I spent the next year going to a University of Hartford art school, and they had a really good course in foundations, and I was probably the hardest working student they'd had in a long time because I was driven to get a better portfolio and get out of there.
Yeah.
And by the end of the year, the teachers were begging me to stay because they hadn't had somebody work so hard. Wow. And I was like, no, I'm out of here. So I actually have my rejection letter and my acceptance letter from CalArts.
Really?
And it was just one of those things where it all made sense once I found out about CalArts. It all made sense that that's what I wanted to do.
Okay.
But I didn't know that, if that makes sense.
Well, then how did you transition from CalArts to Pixar? Was there a Disney dream?
Well, I applied to Disney 3 times over the course of 2.5 years after getting out of CalArts and got rejected each time. And on the 3rd time, I finally gave up. And I said, I'm never going to try to apply to Disney again because this is just too frustrating.
Okay.
And I was one of those kids, and I had a very talented class. And there was always somebody who could do something better than I could, and to get into the animation business, you had to be good at one specific thing. You were a great storyman, you were a great draftsman, you were a great animator, a great painter. something got you into the machinery and then moved your way up to directing. Well, the thing I was good at was like I loved putting it all together and putting on a show, basically. And that nobody was looking for a job for that. And so it was really only out of the kindness and sympathy of my peers when they would sometimes have influence on who got hired for a short job or something. I'd get a job for a while. But it was also anemic. It was pre-Roger Rabbit, and there was unless you were working for Disney, there was no full-time employment. You worked on a project, and you were lucky if it lasted 3 months, and then you'd always expect about a month or two of a dry spell, and then work somewhere else. And I was getting really, really frustrated because I could see myself only getting jobs that I didn't want to do. I didn't want in-betweening jobs. I didn't want cleanup jobs, and I knew that if I took them for too long, I'd get pegged as a cleanup artist or an in-between. I'd never get out of there.
Did you learn that at Cal Arts?
Yeah. So it was a real catch-22. And fortunately, I had 2 student films. One was called Somewhere in the Arctic, and one was called A Story, that made it into Spike and Mike's festival. And that is how I met John Lasseter. John had Red's Dream and Tin Toy at the same time going through the festival. And so every once in a while, I'd be a visiting artist up at San Francisco, and he would be too. And we got to know each other. And so I'm going back a bit, when he was working on Tin Toy, he was so swamped. His fiance, who is now his wife, at the time was working for Apple. And she wanted to make the first ever completely animated short off a Mac computer. And it was called Pencil Test. Yep. And so they begged John to consult on it to get some advice, and he couldn't do it. He was sleeping under his desk trying to finish Tin Toy. But he remembered me and threw out my name, and she called me out of the blue, and I hadn't been working for months, and so I took the gig, and it was good money. Short time, I got to be flown up to Cupertino.
Sweet.
And it was the most serendipitous trip because I met John late that night with Chinese food with his fiance, going over storyboards and trying to help them. And he and I just got along. We had met before as artists, but never worked or tried to do something together. And he and I just got along so great. And it was awesome. And then I left, and I never heard from him for a year. And honest to God, a year later, I'm so hand to mouth with the work and so frustrated at the work I'm getting that I'm seriously considering getting out of the business.
Really?
And I just married my wife. I'm about 6 months into it. I'd made her move all the way to LA from New England, and she hates it in LA. And we have our first big fight, and I'm saying, look, I'm never gonna be able to move anywhere else because the only place animation exists is LA. And go to bed angry. Wake up the next morning, the phone rings out of the blue. It's John Lasseter saying, I can finally hire another animator. I've been the only animator at Pixar for years. We're finally doing commercials. I can hire somebody else. I'd like to hire you. And I said yes without even knowing the details. Moved out of the house, packed up the car. Beverly Hillbillies just went north.
So
and
number 2, man?
Number 2.
That's amazing.
And it was the most, that's why I've always given 200% to this place, because it saved my career. It just completely changed my life around. It was the first job I ever got where I felt like I was hired because of who I was, not because I could hold a pencil or because I could do a job. So I'm sorry, there's no short answer for that.
This is awesome. So what's the last thing that you animated?
Last thing I animated was, there was these 2 tests we did for Toy Story just before we got started. One, and I think they're on the DVD. One's of Woody. They're both in white limbo, and Woody's standing there with a holster, and he's pretending to pull out a gun and sort of shoot something, and he blows the fictitious gun. And then there's one where he's sort of running with no knees, sort of like knees that can bend in both directions, right. Double jointed knees because of the ragdoll quality.
Yeah, I remember that.
Those are the last 2 things I ever animated.
You worked on the Sesame Street stuff. And all that.
Yeah, I worked on all the commercials and stuff, and it was great when we did those, because there was only 3 of us for a long time. There's Pete, John, and I, and we would just change hats every job. We'd well, you storyboard this one, you art direct, I'll animate, and then we'd just keep changing it up.
Sounds fun.
Yeah, it was, and that's how we ended up knowing we'd work together as a team to write Toy Story, because we already had sort of this chemistry. So
I should probably get into. Well, this is probably a more general question. It's how do you approach storytelling, and then I wanted to kind of get into, you working as a co-director on A Bug's Life. So I don't know whatever you want to approach first.
Well, I can get really, really heady and detailed about how to approach story, but the funny thing is that the more I learn and the more I've done it, the more I keep coming back to the same instincts I had when I was just getting a chance to write a feature-length story, which was Toy Story.
Yeah.
And it really comes down to just make me care.
Oh,
It's all I ever really care about is when I sit down and I'm in the middle of a story being either told to me, or I'm watching a movie, or I'm hearing it on the radio. I just don't want to be pulled out. I want to get caught up. I want to get invested in it. And it can get really detailed and very complicated for how to solve that problem. But that's always where I go to, is like, do I care? Do I care anymore? And a lot of the people I know, sometimes for them it's like, I want to laugh, I want to be entertained, I want it to be sexy, I want it to be fast. And all those things are good, but I still think all those things are byproducts of making you care. I mean, there's a thing that I feel more than anything got lost from the Disney films, even when they got successful again in the 80s, that we were very reactionary to with the Pixar films, which was just this sense of wonder. And I don't think you can capture wonder without being willing to be a vulnerable storyteller and being willing to get emotional. You can't close off and be cynical and be cool and hip 100% and expect some of that wonder to make it into an animated film, no matter how well it's crafted or how well it's done. So you have to be willing to be vulnerable. And I might be that way to a fault, but I'd rather be that way, because to me that's the most rare qualities. I never feel like I used to feel as a kid watching those films, and I want to. And I want to all the time whenever I go to the theater. And I want any kid that I see, or any older person, to still be able to feel that way.
Well, was there a movie that totally did that for you, where you were like, because I know for me it was E.T.
Yeah.
But I don't
for me, it's Close Encounters.
Close Encounters?
Yeah.
Spielberg films.
To me, that's... Well, and isn't that funny? I mean, if you feel like you're a cliche, or that you're a shallow or something, like you're giving into the status quo for saying that. But I'm sorry, I'm going to give the kudos where they belong. I mean, there was such a saturation of wonder and I still watch Close Encounters every once in a while just to remind myself how indulgent it can be, and it can still not be too much if it's handled just right.
Yeah.
You know?
That was funny, because you just answered my next question, which was, what in your eyes is the perfect film, and why?
Well, perfect film is a tough thing to say. I mean, there's a lot of films that qualify for the perfect film. A matter of fact, I think it's because we all saw it recently at Pixar, but Shawshank Redemption is a perfect film. I mean, on one level, it's just firing on all cylinders. Cinematically, editorially, screenplay-wise, acting-wise, it's just an awesome film.
It is. It's just, and it hits you so hard.
Yeah, but it's not flashy, and it gets overlooked. But I know that it sort of has this cult following that's just existed for a long time, and I think it's because it's really doing the job.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of films I could say are a perfect film for different reasons.
Yeah, totally.
But that's certainly the freshest one on my mind.
What would you say is the hardest thing about directing an animated movie?
The hardest thing about directing an animated movie is keeping yourself excited about it. It's hard enough to make the crew excited about it, but keeping yourself excited about it, trying to remind yourself, because why you wanted to do it, because it's all about the details once you really start making the movie, and it's no different than building a house or building a very extravagant mansion. I mean, there's a million details that you have to spend more time with after the bigger idea of where the room's going to go, and how is it going to be structured. And it can get you kind of bogged down. I mean, Joe Ramp used to have this great expression that there's always a point during the making of a movie where there's sort of the Columbus, where is the land moment, where everybody on the boat's going, you promised us the land, where is the land, we're not seeing it. And people get bogged down in all the minor problems or the major problems that won't go away, and it's all justified, it's all legitimate to have that response. So for me, to prevent that is to get really, really picky about what story you're going to tell up front. Like, if you have an idea, this is my opinion, it's not a rule, but if I have an idea that I kind of like, then I don't want to do it. If I have an idea that I like, just it affects every fiber in my being. Like that, I want to see that movie made, whether I make it or not. It's like that idea has to get on the screen.
Wow.
That's a real good quality to start with, because it's going to get attacked for the next 4 years, and there's going to be sometimes weeks or months where nothing seems to be going right, and
When
the
you
only
say
thing,
that idea,
yeah.
is it the character or the actual whole?
Who knows? I mean, it comes from the
Something
weirdest
that's
things.
in your heart.
Yeah. Nemo came from an emotional thing. I mean, I wasn't driven to tell a story about fish. There was like this list of stuff that might be an interesting world to play in, and fish in the ocean was definitely one of them. But what suddenly made me go, I have to see that, was the idea of telling it from a father's point of view and dealing with the fear that can never really be answered of how do you trust that nothing bad's going to happen, and the idea of playing in a world that was, I always said, anti-Lion King. There was no circle of life. Everything is out there trying to eat you, and that's really the way the world works. And it is dangerous to cross the street, and you can die if you get hit by the car. So can you play with those rules? And once that all came together, I had to see that movie. I just had to see it, and it informed everything. It informed how I wanted the ocean to look and how I wanted it to feel, and so it's really like I keep coming back to emotion. I keep coming back to wanting to care, wanting to invest myself in something. And so I have the same thing with this new movie that we can't talk about now, but it's more character based, but it's not what I was looking for. Just the character came to me, and I cared so much about that character that I want to see that character alive. I want to see that character in a worthy story. And that's basically it's like looking for oil or something. It's like, where can I find something that has enough fuel that's going to keep me going for years? Because there's going to be large stretches of time where nothing is working, nobody's happy, everybody thinks that the sky's going to fall, and what's going to get me out of bed is just because that idea still has to be on the screen. That's the only thing. So I want that when I'm going to go into battle, because it's going to be battle. And so if I don't have that going in, then I won't go into it. I won't make that movie. And I'm starting to try and insist on that with other filmmakers here at Pixar, because I just know the benefits of it.
When you see other films out there,
Yeah.
and they just don't, they don't have the heart.
Yeah.
And would you say that really is one of the things that separates, not to say this place, but the filmmakers that want to make these types of films?
I want to think that's true. I mean, it's unless you're actually there on films, you don't really know what got them made or what kept them alive or what made them special or when they got special. But you want to believe that the director or the writer or the producer or all of them or somebody really just cared so much.
Yeah.
But I think you can tell. I think you can tell when a film had a vision and when a film didn't. And I think audiences can tell. They may not think about it intellectually, but I think they can feel it.
I agree. Do you get more pleasure out of writing or directing?
Neither. When I'm writing, I hate it. And when I'm directing, I hate it. And I wish I was writing. When I'm writing, I hate it. I wish I was directing. Yeah, it's a weird thing to say, but I love I love the idea of whatever I'm working on getting finished and being this thing on its own on the screen that just exists, like its own world with its own characters that are thinking, and hopefully capturing it so well that you actually believe that world's still going on even after you've left the movie. I want to see that so badly that gives me the energy and the drive to write or to direct or to do whatever other job I got to do on the film.
Okay.
That's the thing that makes me do it. I would not do any of those jobs if I didn't have some big idea that I was dying to see. I'm lazy at heart. Really lazy at heart.
All right, so just like an animator develops an eye for good or bad animation, how do you develop your eye for story and what works and what doesn't?
Yeah, it's tough. I don't, I definitely feel like there's a rhythm to it. You definitely get into a rhythm when you know something's working, and you kind of do the analysis afterwards. I'm much more of the kind of person that loves, if I were to be acting myself, I would want to do improv more than I'd want to do scripted stuff. Just because I love the discovery of happy accidents and seeing what happens when you go with your instinct. But I also love the discipline of taking that information and then really, really understanding it, becoming the authority on it. So, I don't know, what makes a story, or story moments work really well. I kind of want to always stay open to anything, and hopefully some way that I didn't expect it to ever be interesting, but recognize the minute it's working, why it's working, and then be able to capitalize on it, be able to control that, be able to use it.
Well, I'll give you an example though. Like, I remember coming out of the first screening of Nemo.
Mhm.
It was dark, and
Yeah.
it was like so, and everybody was like, yeah, Now, at what point do you say, you know what, because that worked,
Yeah.
but then at some point you guys said, no, that's too dark.
Well, because the truth is that there were story moments that weren't as clear, and there were story moments that weren't as engaging as they could be. I agree with you in that I got self-indulgent with mood. Like I knew so badly that I wanted this kind of mood that I kind of made sure I never dropped the ball on any sequence I was telling all the way through the film. And it was kind of to prove or to sort of drill it into people's head, I think, when I look back at it, like, you could make a movie like this.
Right.
And I think it did the
So
job.
Going further.
Yeah. It's probably like going too far to just ensure that nobody will throw out that idea.
Okay.
And but I was hoping all the scenes worked too, and you liked all the characters. And the truth is that some of that stuff was a little confusing, or it got a little convoluted, or you fell out of being interested, and then you'd fall back in being interested. And you just want, all I ever do is I want to be able to drop into this movie that we're working on at any point, just like I'm home and I'm switching channels. And I want anybody that's going to be watching whatever movie we're working on to be able to like switch channels, catch it at any point, and be totally captivated with that moment. And that doesn't mean all moments have to be 10. I mean, moments could be really, really quiet or really, really slow, and it's part of a greater rhythm, but it still doesn't mean they can't be the best moments that they should be.
Right.
And so, we just have a really picky gang that we work with at Pixar, thank God, and they go, you know what, yes, you could make this movie and it would be great, but if you made this better and this better, and to be honest, nobody tried to make it less dark after that. Everybody fell in love with that. It was more, the film sort of told us what it wanted to be as we fixed moments.
I see.
It kind of lightened some things up, some things got more charming, things certainly got all color, it wasn't all black and white. And it just became what it was. I mean, and so anything that was dark stayed dark, and anything that really didn't want to be dark anymore wasn't. And so it was one of those things where it wasn't really a calculated endeavor.
I see.
I don't know if that makes sense,
That
but
totally makes sense. Can you talk a little bit about cinematography in animated films and how you think about that aspect of the process?
that is actually something we're always getting better at. It's like
Right,
we thought we knew how to work with camera and staging and lighting when we set out on Toy Story, and we made a pretty good first effort. But with each film, we look back and go, "Wow, we kind of fundamentally understood it. We sort of understood camera and lighting and cinematography in 101 or 201." And so with each film, we get smarter, and we put ourselves through school. We never. I mean, I know personally, I don't want any of our films to look the same.
Yeah.
And I don't want you to feel like you can peg a Pixar movie, and the minute you can, then I want to do something different. But I also don't want to make a movie just to be different.
Right.
So you kind of wait for the subject matter of whatever movie you're working on to kind of inform you, because that's what I'm always fascinated with when I'm a DVD-aholic. I'm one of those geeks that's listening to the commentary and the behind the scenes, and I want to know how filmmakers prep and how directors talk with their cinematographers and what it is that they're looking for, and it always comes back to the script. But I'm always fascinated with why they made choices based on the script, like why it was going to be in black and white versus color, why they're going to use this lens versus another lens, why they were never going to use a crane shot, or what.
Yeah.
And so those kind of things we've just slowly educated ourselves about. Brad brought it up a whole nother notch with The Incredibles with his filmmaking sensibilities, and it really, I think, got a lot of us hungry and lulled out of any sort of complacency that we might be having for how we were using the camera. And I know on this new film we've brought in a bunch of really reputable DPs. You know, we got Roger
That was
Deakins,
amazing.
yeah, and Harry Sidavitis and stuff, and just really trying to understand their world. And it's funny, we get the same response from any cinematographer we talk to. They think, well, you guys can, your films look great, and you guys can do anything, so
Right.
why do you need to talk to us? We're always struggling to sort of, you know, make our cameras do more with all the limitations. But what they don't understand, or they do once we explain, is that we want limitations. Great art can't be made without making rules and limitations. And so when you work with a tool like the computer that can basically do anything if you've designed it right, that's bad. You're just going to make, you know, that's like using every crayon in the Crayola box. Like, no, you just know that's going to look bad.
Yeah.
You know, you pick what colors you're going to use, you know, and have a rule. And you want to do the same thing with the camera. And so that's what we're really looking for when we talk to people in the outside world that are making movies, particularly in live action, because they have rules that are forced upon them, and a lot of them don't even have to really think about what those rules are. They just are. You know, the camera's heavy, or the camera can only do this, and they just know that, and they don't look at it as rules. But we have to make those rules in computer and put them into the computer.
Absolutely.
So that we end up working with the same mindset. And so that's really what the education's been in the last couple of films, of like sort of self-imposing rules that match the rules of films that we admire, so that we'll start making the same kind of cinematic choices, and maybe even inherit some of the cinematic happy accidents and limitations that make those things special.
Huh.
You know,
So-
it's nothing that you're hoping anybody's going to look at. They'll just feel more familiar with the film grammar.
Okay, I
Yeah.
get you. I mean, so basically, if any technology or tool was available, would you change any aspect of the process?
The one thing that I wish we could do that makes it really, really difficult in our world is that it's really hard to see the lighting at the same time as working with the camera. And
I love
partly because of rendering and because of the tools we work with, there's a big separation. You actually plan out all your shots, and months go by. You see, you know, early sort of exploratory work, sometimes still frame work from your lighting person about what it might look like. And then months later, you see it all lit. And they're really done separately, and it's awful because you can't compose with light.
Yeah.
You know, you can't have a shot where you go, oh, you know, now that I see that the shadow from that building is completely covering that car and that person, I actually want to use that. You know, I want to actually make them walk in. Unless you've predetermined that idea in story and drawn it in the boards, which happens, but you're not thinking of it every time you're drawing a shot. You can't be reactive. You can't be instinctual. Like, you guys can be instinctual when you're animating. You can have a character that you're posing and then watch it and play it back and then sort of respond to it and then make changes. And
It'd be nice to have that interactivity of having
yeah,
light.
exactly. And so we always feel like we can only improve our cinematography so much unless we have shadow and light to respond to when we're doing camera staging. And so we're working much harder now to make that possible. So hopefully there'll be a slightly more sophisticated cinematic look to our films in the future.
Yeah.
You know?
I think so, because even as an animator, if I had that, and I could step into a pool of light or react to, you know, a light coming from the bottom, just, it might change the way you might play a scene.
Yeah, it's a tool that you'd use.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you can be more subtle. That's his phone. I don't know if it's his
Oh,
mom.
Sorry about that.
Is that his mom? No, mom's not calling right now.
This is not a studio.
His mom makes great cookies, by the way.
She doesn't send them anymore because of those great cookies. And
Oh, you shouldn't have showed it to her.
yeah, I know. She said, these are better than my cookies. A couple more questions. I know you're
No.
totally busy, but from experience, what are the things that you thought were important that you now know are not really that big a deal? Like, what have you learned over all these years?
You know, the biggest one, although it's not sexy, is that there's never going to be a time when everything seems like it's working on the film. You know, until it's absolutely just taken out of your hands and put on film in the can and shown to the audience. And so there's always going to be fires. Like, something's always going to be on fire. Somebody's always going to have something broken or some problem. And I've just learned not to freak out. Like when people put their minds to it, I've seen us solve the biggest, most insurmountable problems possible, or really have over the 16 years here. And there's nothing scares me anymore. You know, I've learned now to just not freak out, not freak out about whatever the problem is, no matter where it's coming from.
Yeah.
And And that kind of sort of calm in the eye of the storm has really made me and anybody that I work with more efficient about how to deal with those problems. You know, they don't have such a ripple effect anymore.
Okay.
You know, I don't know if that's interesting to outside people, but for me, that's a huge win.
No, that's,
you know,
that's huge. And we have some reader questions.
Oh, really?
A couple of people sent in some questions. What does the animator bring to the story at that level?
Oh,
Okay, you gotta go.
I gotta go, but I can
All
follow
right.
up later if you need
we'll
more
follow
questions.
up later, but thank you anyway.
Thank
we
you.
can continue in the next episode. Thanks
The
a
life
lot,
of the
Andrew.
busy director.
All right. Stanton, thanks for coming back down.
You're welcome, Andrew Gordon.
I guess I just wanted to ask a couple of questions from our, readers' site. We sent.
That's impressive. You actually have readers.
We have a couple of readers, yeah.
Like two.
Yeah, two or three. Someone asked, would you ever be interested in doing an animated film in a genre that had never been done in animation?
Yeah, to be honest, I get asked questions like that all the time. And would you ever do something that's PG-13 or R and everything? And my answer always is, we're story driven, and we'll do whatever the story asks us to do. There's a couple films coming up the pipe that are hitting genres we haven't done before, and you kind of hope that you'll do things like that, but you don't want that to drive it. You want to come up with a story or a conceit that just is so cool that it makes you make all those other kinds of choices. But the other truth is there's a big assumption out there that we're making family movies because that's where the money is, because that's what's popular, or that's the only way to get in the business, or I don't know. The truth is that you're seeing movies that we would make even if nobody was paying us. I mean, these are the kind of movies we like, and they happen to be pretty family friendly. And that doesn't mean they'll always be like that, but there's nothing's held back. I mean, so we'll definitely probably make other genres. Who knows when? It's really, a lot of people don't realize that Pixar's is director based. I mean, it's not a bunch of people sitting in a room going, what should we do next? What's the big master plan? There's never been a meeting like that. It's really more like, hey, we love working with Pete Docter. We love working with John Lasseter. We love working with Brad Bird. What do they want to do next? And we do whatever they want to do. Everybody gets that's what, Coppola or Scorsese or Spielberg or Soderbergh, whoever you want to pick, does.
Yeah.
They find a project that interests them, and then they do it. And so we invest in the person, not in the studio.
It doesn't have to do with like the marketability. Everybody always says anime. Why doesn't anime play in this country? Isn't it kind of like cultural? The fact that people take their families to see an animated film, they kind of think it's going to be family oriented, right?
It's hard to. I mean, you've had 70 years of conditioning in the United States that if it's animated, that means kids can see it.
Right.
And you have to take that into account, that there's so many people that just don't turn their brains on, that don't even check the rating on things, and they just say, it must be good for kids, and then they get mad, and you're like, well, they put the information out there, you're just lazy, you didn't read it. So, I mean, you're not going to ever let that stop you. I remember there was a lot of concern about, Incredibles being a little bit more PG, and we knew there was a lot of trust in the audience that, what our movies were like, so we tried really hard to educate the public that this was going to be a big-time Raiders-like action picture, and hope that they were listening,
That makes sense.
Yeah.
All right, the next one is, are there trends in animation that you see too much of?
Yeah. I remember when we started making Toy Story, that it started to be that everybody wanted to get on the animation bandwagon, and suddenly what seemed like an original idea for a short time suddenly turned into a formula, and it was, you got to have songs, and you got to have popular names, and you got to have our little town and a villain, and it's got to be based on a fairy tale. And it's weird, you can now look at all the trailers for things that are coming out this year and stuff, you feel like you could all cut it into one movie. It's like everything is now got to be wacky and funny with as many stars crammed into it as possible, and it got to be irreverent, got to be Shrek-like, and all these things individually are probably cool qualities, but now you're seeing everybody do the same thing, and it's becoming a formula again, and it makes me not want to have anything to do with animation, because I don't want to go see the same thing. I go to the movies hoping to see something I've never seen before. Sure, I want to be as entertained or as fulfilled as whatever the last hit was, but I don't want to be fulfilled the same way. I feel like it's our job to know better than the audience what they want. You know, that's your job as an entertainer. Your job isn't to follow trends or to second guess.
Right.
Your job is to be an arbiter of taste. You know.
That's totally true. That's a great response. Thanks. Someone also asked, and I kind of already know the answer to this question, but I'd love to hear from you. What does the animator bring to the story?
Not much. No, just kidding. You know, they really. I always say this, and I don't like to say it in front of animators because that's all I need is more going for your egos. But they're the stars of your movie, and you've heard the term in live action of once you've got the script and the casting correct, then pretty much everything falls into place. And if those two things are out of kilter, it can be a really difficult, if not an impossible, thing to make a good movie. And, you know, the animators are your stars. They really are the guys that will put the special something, or the gals, you know, in the special something into your characters. And it sounds cliche, but they give them life, and they give them a unique thumbprint. The thing that constantly amazes me, even though I've seen it behind the scenes for, you know, almost 2 decades now, is how a group of people can all work on one character, and it can feel like one kind of character, one person with a mind of its own.
Yeah.
You know, when we're privately at Pixar, and I'm sure it's the same in any other animation studio, you can start to tell people's styles and go, oh, that person likes to do that a lot. But the nice thing is that, you know, everybody's pretty on each other's case here, and they stop them from getting into bad habits. And what I find is more identifiable isn't anything you can really put your finger on. It's more like there's a sensibility, and it's interesting because we animate with files, right? So it's like typing something on a word processor and then asking somebody to go edit your piece. You have to get in there and really mess with all their typing, and so it's really sort of frowned upon to sort of share scenes and stuff. And but it's interesting because I find that we don't cast based on character. It's not like we give only this person this character. We cast based on, I think, people's entertainment strengths or acting strengths. There's some people that do subtle really well. There's some people that do funny really well. There's some people that do physical movement, you know, like the Dickens. Everybody has sort of things that are hard to sort of put down, very ethereal qualities sometimes. Sometimes you can't even put your finger on it. You just know that this certain animator is going to give it the right thing that scene needs, and it's really getting to know them as people. It's just like a director knowing a group of actors, and knowing all their strengths and really getting how somebody can play a role. Because whenever we're behind the scenes, the director with the directing animators is you're casting usually from your gut. You're casting with like, you know, I really know that so and so could really make that a great scene, you know.
Yeah, I guess that totally gives the argument for casting that way. I know a lot of guys around here have wanted that lead thing that would kind of try on monsters. And I guess it has its pluses and minuses.
Right, there's no black and white, there's no right or wrong, but we found you could really kind of guarantee that the moments will get what they need if you could cast according to the needs of the scene and not the consistency of the character. Because frankly, I can't even think of a time in any of the films where we had a problem with consistency of character, even though a lot of people are animating it. Because we do daily so well, because we meet with animators every morning and they see everybody working on the same scenes, and they hear the director and the other animators giving comments, it does the job of making everybody go follow the same rules, you know? You hear that one note about Dory 5 times in a screening, and everybody gets, oh, that's always what Dory should or shouldn't do.
That's so true.
You know, so it feels like it's a solution to a problem that doesn't exist. There is no problem with consistency of character, so why should there be a lead character animator and stuff?
Yeah, right.
I think we'd switch the minute it became a problem.
Yeah.
Or I could see us on a film where just that film asked that for some unique reason. I mean, the thing
because people gravitate towards certain characters anyway.
Right. And sometimes, you know, when the dust settles and the film's over, you've realized, you know, I gave a lot of, you know, Mr. Incredible scenes to this guy, and I gave a lot of Mike scenes. And it kind of happens naturally, and you'd rather have it happen organically.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, I guess it's kind of more interesting for you, too. as a
Yeah,
director.
you sort of, because you don't know ahead, you can guess.
Yeah.
But if I bet you anything, if you wrote down a sheet at the beginning of who you thought would be the people that would be sort of your winning animators behind each of the characters, I'd bet you 60% of it would be wrong when you looked at the end of the movie who you really gave all the footage to.
I guess that for an animator, it's like an ownership thing. It's like, well, I got to work on mostly this character, and they feel like they have something to do with that, you know.
Yeah. But, my feeling always comes down to what's the best thing for the movie. That's the
Yeah.
thing I'm very proud of about Pixar's. All their decisions is based on that. And even if we made very concrete decisions on one film, we'll make a completely different set of decisions on the next one. We don't care about that kind of consistency. It's about what is the best thing for that movie. And whatever that is, we'll do. And sometimes it comes across unfair to the crew, like you're giving somebody more of this, or how come you're giving this department more love than us.
Yeah.
But if you're being true to the picture, and you should be able to look them in the face and say, it's because this is what's best for the movie,
Yeah, totally.
You know?
You know, that leads me to another question, though, that when you see the success of movies that have just recently come out, like, I don't want to even say, but they do so well, yet they're not animated necessarily with the polish level that we're doing and the acting level. So, I don't know, do you think people care out there about
I think they do. I don't know if you can look at if you rated everything that made the most money meant it had the most quality in any part of anything in the world that you want to poke at, not just entertainment, then you'd have a really kind of weird view of what's quality.
I mean, if the story was like amazing, I mean, you could possibly do it in like, sand or whatever, and it would still move people, theoretically.
Right.
I don't know.
I just think that any artist that's really trying to do art is always striving to perfect whatever it is they're working on. So, fortunately, even if it's just we're just deluding ourselves that we're working for some big corporation, the truth is that, in our day-to-day, we feel like we're artists getting to do our art. And if you're really feeling like that's what you're doing, you can't help but want to make it better. You can't help but just want to improve every little inch of it before it's taken out of your hands.
Yeah.
And so I think that even if nobody was going to watch the film, even if we were just going to be the only ones that got to watch our own work, we'd work at it like this.
Yeah, that's true.
And I think that people can tell that. I can't say that means it's going to be successful, but it makes me feel like the people that really would appreciate it will get it.
What is the best path? I don't really know if this is really. I'll ask you. What's the best path for a person trying to become a director?
That's tough because I look back on my career, and that's what I think I wanted to do, although I didn't know it, and I'm kind of glad I didn't, because I might have made some stupid choices thinking this is what you must do to be a good director. I never set out to be a director, so I don't know. I mean, I fell into it because the minute I got the opportunities to have my opinion heard, I really, really had, I would say something when I had a strong opinion, and I would keep my mouth shut when I didn't. I think there's a lot of people that think that to be a director means you always got to have an answer, and that you've always got to know what to do. And I think that just gets annoying really quick. I think a really good director knows where the answers are and gives credit wherever that should be, and they could care less where they get the answer from. A really good director, even if they didn't come up with any of the answers, knows how to get them and how to say, hey, call that janitor in. He had a pretty good idea the other day. I heard him in the hallway. Let's go with that, and have no ego about it. And that's the guy you want steering your ship, because you're going to get to land because that guy's making the smart decisions about how to get there. It's not about him having all the answers. It's not about him sailing the ship himself. And I think that that's something that I didn't know ahead of time, but I witnessed the bad example and the good example working under other directors, and really sort of instinctually fell into that.
As co-director on Bugs Life, did you learn a lot?
I learned only good things working under John.
Yeah.
But I worked other places prior and heard other things, and
Sure.
and the thing that always impressed me was that John could care less where the ideas came from, and he would be very open about that, and he'd be very open about giving credit where they came from. and it makes everybody just want to do their job even harder, you know, and makes everybody want that person to stay being the director because they know those kind of wise decisions are being made the whole time, you know.
Totally agree. I mean, just being in those dailies with you guys back then, it was just so interesting to not only hear both perspectives, but to, you know, what degree something serviced the film and why a choice was made.
Yeah, we bantered a lot in front of you guys, didn't we?
Yeah, it was great.
That was really my job, is to just be the guy that wouldn't play the Emperor's clothes, because it was easier then, because we were all just starting, and John was still John Lasseter, but it was, you know, it's amazing how even when people don't mean to, the more popular things get, and the more famous somebody becomes, and the more you grow, the more people just walk into the doors just wanting to put, you know, people on a pedestal. And
well, I think that's probably the problem with a lot of movies, right?
yeah, you can sort of see the Emperor's clothes thing happen. Like, I'll bet you that choice got made because nobody had the guts to say no, or that's a bad idea. But you know, it's one of those things that you have to give John a lot of credit of really being a proponent for that kind of communicating between people, and you know, he really fosters that in this building. He wants everybody to feel like they can be open about, you know. And I've seen some bad examples of people just always talking off their mouth and never knowing when to shut up. There's an art to when to not say something, and just waiting for the right time, because there's a lot of times where people have their ears closed and you're just wasting your time.
Yeah, like last day, you're trying to final your shot. Might want to go, you know, into their office and talk to them.
Right.
Well, thanks again for coming down and doing this. This is like going to really be a great thing for, you know, people to hear.
Good, I hope so. And for the 2 people that are listening, I hope some of this is useful. Certainly email Andrew with any more questions.